Luckily, this is a pretty decent squash harvest, although this squash is a little funny shaped. And if you can hear my dog in the background drinking water really loudly, just ignore him. Between him and the AC, it's quite loud. Now, sympathy squash, they're pretty good size, right? But they look a little funny shaped, and I think that has to do with some of the disease that was introduced to the plants from the squash bugs. And I went into my garden because I noticed there was a lot of downy mildew and discolored leaves, and I thought, well, let me take out some of the plants, and that'll leave just a few larger plants to produce squash. But as I started pulling out the plants, I noticed not only were there a ton of squash bugs on them, there was a lot of damage from squash vine borers, and you could see where the stems just looked like pure sawdust and just pulp coming out of them. And I thought, that's why they're discolored. They probably have disease, and there's a huge influx of pests now that we're right at that season where everything's coming out. And so luckily I've already started some baby squash plants, and I'm going to show you what those look like right now. Last time I started seeds, I showed the paper a couple days ago. It literally took less than a month for me to be able to transplant them outside. Squash grows so fast. So now that I have them under grow lights, and they've already started, I think Thursday I'll go ahead and up-pot them into a larger pot and let them get really established before transplanting them outdoors. And because this is just the same varieties like these that I already have planted, they should grow fairly well, produce a lot really quickly, and hopefully get us through the rest of summer. But if they don't, I'll just go ahead and start a third round of squash, and we have to continuously start squash for the entire year. I'm okay with that because so far we're getting a pretty good harvest. But unfortunately, these 7 squash you see here will be the last 7 squash that we'll get for quite a while. I guess while we're at it, I'll go ahead and show off this. So everything's still kind of dirty, but these are the fennel I harvested yesterday from our garden, and they are all babies that came from 2 fennel plants that I originally planted over 2 years ago now, and they've just continued producing. And then all of these onions I pulled up, and I found this massive wonky looking carrot under my rose bush, so it must have come from last year sometime because I didn't plant carrots over there this year. And I guess when I was pulling back all the weeds in the front garden, I found this and thought, wow, that's insane, because I just saw the top of it, and so I knew it would be a pretty decent sized carrot, which it is, but it looks crazy. Now this is still edible, and all the greens to the carrot are edible too, but I just thought it was really crazy. It's amazing how much food the garden is producing. I'm still a little disappointed about the lack of squash though. Luckily I have a freezer full of vegetables. Okay, so this is the storage room, which you guys know is an absolute nightmare, but here we are. I just threw this cilantro in here. I'm drying the seed for coriander. I pulled it all out yesterday of the ground. You can see it's just absolutely, they're massive plants now that they bolted. They're well over 3 feet tall, probably close to 4 feet. And then as the seeds dry, this is what they look like. I'm thinking about making a hanger, kind of like they make the IBC showers, but to hang the cilantro outside so it can dry, because it is such a massive plant once it bolts and goes to seed. And there's a lot of it. I mean, we'd probably get quite a bit of seeds once these dry, which is the easiest way to do it. But honestly, I might have to start picking off the green seeds and just dry them in the oven because there's so much of it, and the smell of cilantro is so overwhelming. It's coming out of this room and going throughout the rest of the house, and my son was complaining about it yesterday. He was saying that it was really weird and overwhelming smell, and he just wasn't excited about it. You can see it's just propped up against the wall next to the fish tank. I just kind of threw it in here yesterday without hanging it up because I didn't know what to do with all of it. And then over here, now you can see back here what I mean by storage room and undergoing a lot of DUI. I don't know why I said DUI. DIY. A lot of DIY. Lord, I rarely even drink, so that's funny. So here are some marjoram that was growing outside. What I did was I took some little rubber bands and I just wrapped them around them while I was picking it from the garden. I ended up getting 4 bands of this. And so I hung it on this clothing rack here that I have. It's to help me sort clothes when I'm hanging up clothes all at once and then put them in the closets that they go into. But this makes such a good little hanging rack. So I just zip tied some of them to it because I didn't know what else to do with it. I will never have a large enough herb drying rack. That's something that I really need to work on as time goes by. But you can see the marjoram just all kind of hanging out here. Time to turn on the grow lights. Now, I said that I'd show you my squash, and I will, but look at all these. The Bazzano tomatoes. These are the Brad's Crazy Cherries. You can see how much they've grown since last time. Just everything's popping up. What's all popping up is that sweet basil, and it's making me crazy because that's the one thing I really, really was looking forward to. But everything else is looking wonderful. These are the little hibiscus plants, which I'm pretty excited about that because hibiscus tea is one of my absolute favorite drinks of all time. You can see just how well these okra are doing being started inside where there's kind of a steady temperature versus outside where it keeps going hot, cold, hot, cold. These will be perfect to transplant right about the time the heat really hits the end of May. So I'm looking forward to that. I try to transplant them out before they get that really big taproot. And as promised, my squash, and here it is. So they're doing pretty well. This half is the Cozell squash, and then over here I have some Zephyr squash. And you can see it's finally starting to pop up right there, out of there. So these will be the replacements to the other squash plants. And if you look closely right here, we're already getting third leaves. So these little leaves in the center will be the first set of true leaves. These are still the seed leaves, and those will eventually fall off. But once they get about this size, and it only takes a week after that before you absolutely have to pot them into their own pots. And I like potting them into the 4.5 to 5 inch pots. And so here's one of the 4.5 inch pots. And I pot them up to those, and then they grow to a pretty good size. And I have a good example outside because the biggest plants out there were started and I potted them up, and the smaller plants I didn't. And the bigger plants have produced a ton of fruit, whereas the smaller ones are just starting to produce fruit. So I can see, since I started them about the same time, how important it was for me to pot them into individual containers and give them a little bit more time to grow under their grow light without the pest pressure and fluctuations in temperature, rain, and humidity that we face outside. So I'm hoping that maybe these will get out there and we'll kind of beat the squash bugs a little bit, but since the squash bugs have already obliterated the first round of our plants because we don't have any kind of insect netting or anything yet to cover them with. Over time, I will start grabbing insect netting, grab shade cloth, grab things that I can overwinter my plants under, but I'm not there yet. I'm just kind of really getting to where I can spend more money in the garden. So over time, I will get those different accessories, as I like to call them, garden accessories, but different tools to help me grow, all year round. But it is a process, guys. I don't want anyone to think that you have to go outside and just do this all at once. If you have it, you can afford it, and you can mentally and emotionally handle doing all at once, go on and do it. I think that's awesome. But for me, that wasn't an option. And I know for a lot of people, it's not. So don't think you just have to be all in, because you don't, just start where you can. Guys, look at these mushrooms. So I came out here to show you the squash, but I want to show you all of these amazing fungi that are growing in the garden. When I first started gardening, I was really freaked out about the fungus showing up. I didn't know much about soil health. It's not something you really hear about when growing. And so I was really freaked out. I'm glad to see them now because I know that means that they're helping provide nutrients underground and improve my soil health for my other plants. But if you don't know about fungi, they're really beneficial in the garden. Obviously, I tell my children about not eating different fungi or mushroom that they find in the garden and the dangers behind that. So they know pretty much if you see a wild mushroom, treat it as it's poisonous, because I'm not a mycologist and I don't have the knowledge to teach them what is safe and what's not. There are too many lookalikes. For me, it's just absolutely not worth the risk at all. And look at this. There's some blackberries in here. Quite a bit. We're picking these still several times a day, and they are still producing, so you can see the sheer amount of green berries. Last night my husband, he made a blackberry smoothie with milk, frozen blackberries, and sugar, so it's really simple, and the kids absolutely adored it. We also make ice cream in a similar fashion, and we'll basically make the smoothie and freeze it. Just all of these little things. So we've have so many uses for this, and we still have 2 gallons in the freezer, and we're working on filling a 3rd gallon bag right now. So after using it all of the time, I think that we're going to add, I want to at least triple the amount of plants that we have. We want to do 2 more beds over here just like this, and they're both going to be dedicated to blackberries also. And then right here, all my cucumber plants, which are still getting big. I'm trying to walk quickly because I'm so excited to show you that we actually have, look at this, baby cucumbers. They're everywhere. There are so many little baby cucumbers. So now we have, here are the male flowers, and it's just the same as our squash plants. The male flowers don't have a fruit at the bottom, and the female flowers do. So these are white cucumber variety. They're salt and pepper cucumbers from Johnny Seeds, so I'm really excited to see how they turn out. And look at this, there's already a freaking squash bug over here. I hate these things. I hate the way they smell. Gross. Look at that, I squished it. It's disgusting when you squish them, but I would rather do that than have them destroy my plants. And of course I'll go inside and wash my hands to get rid of the smell. Just wipe it off in the grass for now. I used to be totally freaked out by squishing those insects, but the more you garden, the more you realize you'd rather protect your plants than care about getting insect guts on you. Look at that. So many little cucumbers. I'm pretty excited about those. And so these are what I was talking about, all of the smaller plants over here. And let me kind of turn. Oh my gosh. There's another stinking... So luckily I got the variety... Look at that, gross. The variety that is resistant to a lot of different types of wilt and fungal diseases, but also diseases from insects that come, especially with squash bugs and leaf-footed bugs, which are basically stink bugs, and which are literally stink bugs. What am I talking about? And look, here's a cucumber where the flower hasn't opened yet. I'm glad that I did, because I'm seeing so many pests out here already this year. So I'm really worried that we won't get a harvest. But hopefully we will. Cucumbers are the one thing we really wanted to grow. And look at this. Oh, geez. Oh gosh. I thought it was another leaf-footed bug, but it actually was a bee in there. And look, this is in there too, some type of striped beetle. And then look at the amount of fruit on here. They are just everywhere on this one plant. Quite a bit of fruit. Several that have already been pollinated. And so these are all of our smaller ones. And they're planted so closely together because honestly I didn't think they would survive. And then in between I planted these okra plants, which now are kind of starting to take over a bit. They're starting to shoot up. So about the time the squash is finished and will probably get taken over by pest pressure, everything else will be ready to start harvesting. And like, we're getting some that are about ready now. These are the Zephyr squash, and I love them because they're yellow and green all at the same time. It's so cool cutting them up into bags because it looks like you have several different squash varieties in there, but it's just one with multiple colors. And then look at this. I don't remember what this is. It's either a cantaloupe or a watermelon. It's some type of melon, but it already has little babies on it. I'm really excited to see what they are. I didn't write it down when I planted these, so I'm wondering if maybe I thought I planted them. Maybe I let one of the boys plant them. I don't even know. I remember talking about planting melons out here, but I just can't remember what they were. For some reason I thought they were watermelons, but they're really looking more and more like cantaloupes. And look, here's another one right there. But they also look like they have stripes on them, so that's confusing in itself. There are only 2 little melons on them so far. And then here are the first Smellflowers that just opened today. Here's one, already has a little honeybee in there. And here's the other one. So these are the first Smellflowers of these melons. That's a good sign. And if you don't know, melon flowers, just like squash flowers, they are edible. You can cook them and fry them up all the same. And then over here, I must have known that my squash would need to be ripped out. You can see just how different this bed looks without all the giant squash plants in there. You can see where we missed some of the onions that were growing underneath the squash, and even some of the watermelon radishes. But I remember saying about a week and a half ago that I didn't remember planting okra, but it looked like there was an okra plant growing in here. But it turns out there are okra plants planted strategically where the squash was, which means when I came out here to seed okra, I must have said, oh, these squash will succumb to pests soon, and planted them out here. And I'm glad they did, because now you can see the okra are spaced perfectly to take over this bed, and as the hot months set in really well, this okra will just suddenly shoot up. And there will be a time where peppers and okra, it'll be so hot here, those will mainly be what's growing in the garden. So it's really cool that I kind of thought ahead, even though I completely forgot that I did so, and planted these okra here. These are a Clemson spineless variety called Heavy Hitter, and they produce, on average, they're saying up to 250 pods per plant. That's really exciting. That's quite a bit. So I'm hoping that from the pods planted, or the plants planted here, I'll get a lot of okra pods. It looks like I have 1, 2, 3, 1 back there, so 4, 5, 6 okra that I see planted here. So that's pretty good, and unlike the squash, it'll be easier to harvest. Now, we didn't plant the squash in a row, we planted them in this bed, and as they got big, they kind of grew together. It was really hard to harvest them. They literally would go from one side of the bed all the way to the other, 4 foot across, even though they were a bush variety. So I'm thinking growing them more in a hill like this is ideal. That's what's going to work best for us, because we could walk up one side and around the other. It's a lot easier to harvest. I think we're going to do this from now on. You can see where the lettuce is starting to go to seed. We're going to save seed from this lettuce. This one took the longest to go to seed, and even with it at seed, some of the leaves are still pretty good. They're bitter at the very end where they're more crispy, but they're not inedible yet. So this is the Cimarron heirloom lettuce. It's one of my favorite lettuce varieties. I will definitely always have a place for it in my garden as far as I can see, because it is great for storage and making wraps. The leaves are large. It's good for salads. It's just perfect all the way around. And then here you can see more okra kind of hanging out here underneath the berries. But there are just a ton of berries to harvest. And yes, I still need to weed the garden very severely. I think that's going to be one of my main focuses this next couple of weeks before school starts again. I am out of school officially until June, so I'm going to take advantage of the next month doing all the projects that I need to around the garden and the house that I can possibly get in. I don't know how many I can squeeze in such a short period of time, but it's amazing how much more time you have when you're not dedicating such a large portion of it to schoolwork. I think I forget just how much work school is. when I finally graduate, and I do plan on going up all the way to my doctorate, but when I'm finally done with school, it's gonna just be absolutely insane to me. It's so much time. And of course, as I get closer to being done with school, the house becomes more finished, the garden ends up having more things growing, but it's also more manageable because I'm getting better at processing things pretty quickly when they come inside the house. So overall, it's just like as you age and kind of find your systems, life seems to become a bit more manageable. Look, another stinky bug on them. Wherever it went, that was a baby leaf-footed bug. Wreaks havoc, causes your fruit to get hard and turn brown because they suck the juice out of them, and it can cause a lot of disease for your plants, which is unfortunate. So that's why I try to smush them when I see them. It's just amazing to me, how much life changes. I never expected all of this to be occurring the way that it is, but I'm glad that it is. I didn't realize when I started gardening, I did it, but I didn't realize it was going to bring us all so much joy and how much it would bring us together as family, but build us as individuals. And I think gardening is lovely because it does teach your kids a bunch of responsibility, but in a way that's enjoyable. Sometimes the hard lessons don't have to be that hard, and that's nice. Look at all of these berries still forming. They're steadily producing flowers. So one thing I love about these varieties is that they produce both on the primocanes, so the first year growth, and the floricanes, which is the second year growth. Look at this, another freaking leaf-footed bug. They're everywhere this year. Sheesh. Is this what we're doing? Just taking over everything. I'm not happy about that, honestly. I'm hoping that they don't attack the grapes. I don't even know what this is. Look at this. But I know I don't want it on my plant. Go away. I'm hoping that they don't attack the grapes, because I really, really want to harvest grapes since it's the first year our grapevines have ever produced grapes, and all 3 of them are producing. But I don't know how I'm possibly, that is a massive berry, look at that, compared to my thumb, gonna get enough airflow to these grapes with the way that they're growing. And let's see, you can kind of see some of the small clusters right in here. There are quite a bit of them growing, so that's pretty incredible. But one of my husband's coworkers, he actually has a vineyard, and so he keeps saying we really need to think about airflow and pruning, and I'm going to have my husband ask him more questions because I have no idea how to do any of that. And while I can Google it and YouTube and read about it, it would be really nice having someone who does it, that we know, giving us advice, because it works for him, so hopefully it'll work for us. Look at this. This grapevine has gone all the way across these 4-foot wide IBC cages to the other side, and recently I put like a little water catchment barrel so that I could scoop water out of it to water this part of the garden. So it's just kind of a passive system. It's nothing special. It's not being pumped or anything. It's just because it's such a rainy season, the rain will fall in the barrel. I'll be able to scoop it out and water my garden. So it kind of works out for me. So that's pretty much what's going on in this garden over here right now. Hopefully everything will continue to grow and improve, and just look at how big this grapevine is now. 20 feet long grapevine. It's incredible. I cannot wait to show more about how these grapes grow and produce, and then you can see that area and where we plan on putting some more squash and everything else in. So it will be really fun to continuously update as this garden expands, because I'm getting really serious about gardening, and because it sparked so much joy, I think it'll be a lot more beneficial to expand than I thought. And also, I just love doing what I do. So thank you guys for taking a walk around my garden with me.